Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the Scotch game, and mostly we're going to focus on the move 5 knight b3 from white. So Scotch game is starting with moves e4. So first white is entering the position with the pawn to e4, king's pawn getting into the center. We're replying with the same. Now we have a classical situation where both pawns met in the center. Knight f3 targeting the pawn on e5. We're playing knight c6 defending the pawn on e5 and also controlling the d4 square. And now basically after d4 we entered the position like already of the Scotch position. We're going to get either Scotch game or Scotch gambit. It is going to depend on the next move from white. So here we're taking on d4. It's obvious we have to clear situation in the center. And here white has choice to take the pawn, recapture it back, or not. So if white is not recapturing, we're getting gambit, but in this case we're having a Scotch game since white is taking to the knight on d4. So the main idea of the Scotch game is that white is having a pawn in the center already, the e4 pawn, which is controlling also another important square in the center, d5. But the drawback of this position is the knight spent 2 moves to get to the d4 square. And well, it can be a bit shaky because on d4 it's a good square definitely, but it could be not so great because it's very easy for black to develop and target the knight early on. So we're going for bishop c5 is definitely a good move, attacking move on the bishop, on the knight, sorry. And knight has to do something, or knight has to be defended. We have different chapters depending on where knight goes or what white does in this position. So in this case, we're going to look at knight b3, which is becoming recently very critical. The main idea is, of course, to target the bishop on c5 and well, let me remember first of all, target the bishop on c5. And of course, there are also other moves like bishop coming to b4 and bishop e7. But bishop b4 looks like that position is going to prefer white later. And bishop e7 is a bit too passive, also blocking the queen in some lines and taking away the square from the knight on e7 for some variations. So we're going for bishop b6. It's pretty much the most optimal square for the bishop, and well, we're going for it definitely. Okay, and okay, well, getting into this position right now, now white's plan is following. White wants to go for queen e2, knight c3, a4, and develop the bishop, let's say somewhere on e3 or g5. It will depend. If we will have knight here, then definitely on g5. So and castle long. That's the plan of white. And if we're not managing to get something in return during whole this plan is being executed, then we're going to have some issues. So that's why this chapter is very important. It's very, very important because of the trickery of the move order, and we have to understand when we play what and why. We have to understand our moves, and we have to understand how do we react on some particular moves from white. So that's why this chapter is a bit more tricky than the others, and we have to pay attention for sure. We cannot just blindly make a move. We have either to double check, or just we have to understand why we're going this or that move. So in this position, white has 3 main moves: queen e2, knight c3, a4, which might all transpose later in all these 3 moves playing one after each other. But also there is a move bishop d3. Oh, sorry. Let me do this with yellow, not with red. So yeah, bishop d3 is another move, but it doesn't really support the concept of white. So we're going to start with the bishop d3 since it's something which is less critical. Well, first of all, now we can understand that white is not going for this long castle idea. White is going to go for the short castle. Why this plan is not critical? Well, first of all, white spent the 1 move of the time. It's a developing move, definitely, but it doesn't create any threats particularly. And also, considering that the knight is currently on b3, there is a knight missing on f3, it would be nice to have a defender. So we can always consider playing queen h4 to enter the position to put pressure on the king, which is going to be on g1, and the pawn on f2. So that's why it's very important here that we are ready to develop the knight to f6 or g7, but we are playing a very flexible move, which we're going to play many times in the position. This is a d6 move. Let me first remove the arrows. So this move we're playing a few times. We want to be flexible. First of all, we're not developing the knight, not to block the queen coming to h4. Secondly, we're also controlling the e5 square so that there is no break happen with e5. Thirdly, we open the bishops. There are many good things about this move. And, well, it's also the move which is kind of a waiting move, we can say, because we will see what white is going to play in the next move. And we are ready to react accordingly. So let's start with the castle, which feels like a normal move. Then we have queen h4 instantly. Queen is getting to the square where it's kind of unpleasant because there is no knight on f3 and it cannot be kicked. So the queen is looking very good there. Knight c3, and here we go, knight f6. So this position doesn't cause any problem for black, even though black can actually get better here. We have a very nice ideas, nice play. Our bishop from b6 is looking at the king from the a7 g1 diagonal. Our queen is in perfect location on h4 to create an attack. We are threatening to go with a knight to g5, target the weak squares. Maybe they're currently not so weak, but they're targets definitely, which we can use later. And well, we're also ready to castle very quickly and develop the bishop potentially to g4 as well. So yeah, definitely the position has a huge attacking opportunities for black. So in case of knight c3, if white is going knight c3, now if we are going to play queen h4, the problem is that this is not really going to work with the same power as before, since the king has not been committed to short castle. So after queen h4, white could just defend the pawn, probably with something like queen e2, because, okay, of course, f2 is hanging. And after that, king can still go to the long castle. So what are we doing instead? We're going for developing move, knight g7. Of course, there is a drawback in this move because now we actually finally developed the knight and there is no queen h4 option. But it's okay. I mean, like, sometimes we have to play such move, but queen h4 would not just make sense. We couldn't just blindly go queen h4 hoping for white to castle. So knight g7 we go. What is the main idea? Why we don't develop the knight on f6? The point is that from e7 square, knight is controlling and supporting some pawn pushes later in the game, f5 and d5. So that would be really nice to have knight on e7. The drawback again that the queen is blocked on d8. It cannot be developed to h4, but it's okay. Sometimes there are good things in the move, sometimes there are a bit more bad things, so it's fine. So let's say white is castling, then we are also castling, and again we're having the ideas of pushing for d5 or f5. In this particular case, f5 would be very strong, also opening up the f file, potentially targeting the pawn on f2 due to our beautiful bishop on b6. And well, the position looks great for black. I mean, there are no issues. We equalized easily this one. And again, not a critical move at all. So that was a bishop d3. Now we're going to get started with all these other more critical moves, queen e2, knight c3, and a4. Let's start with queen e2. Well, okay, first of all, these moves can transpose into each other. So that's why it's not really... sometimes it's not really so tricky, but it is indeed tricky with which move to start. Because in this particular case, we don't yet know how white is going to continue. If white is going to play a4, next move, or knight c3, and bishop e3 is already a question. So the flexible move, which we kind of almost always want to start with, is a d6 move. And in this position, we go for d6, and we're still waiting a little bit with queen on f6 and knight g7 plan. So yeah, so sometimes we just need some time to wait a little bit, just trying to be flexible and see how white is going to react, because d6 move is very valuable. It's very much needed and very useful. We're controlling e5 again, opening the bishop, so it's a very good move. So let's say if a4, we're just transposing with a5. Of course, in this position, we have also other replies on a4, but we can just transpose to the a4, a5, queen e2 line. Okay, so yes, let's look at another move. So here, bishop e3 feels like white can already go for the bishop e3, but I mean, here we're going to see more in this position because we can go with queen f6. Also, it's attacking the pawn on b2, so white has to play knight c3, and after knight g7, we transpose to the main line, which we're going to discuss later. So knight c3 immediately. Also, of course, very logical, another move order. So here the point is that we have to always be ready to face bishop coming to e3. And this is pretty important. That's why in this position we go for a5. The point of this move is that we are threatening a4, and if white would stop a4 with playing a4 themselves, then we have a very strong move, knight b4. We're bringing the knight to b4, and main idea is not only to have the knight on such a beautiful square and target c2, but also to stop the idea, which of course is connected with knight attacking the pawn on c2, stopping the idea of bishop e3, because now after bishop e3 we're just taking the bishop, and basically white would force to take with a pawn, since after queen e3 there is knight c2 and white is lost. So yeah, knight b4 is a very important move here. And actually, I mean, I would expect a4 to be played. Of course, there is other move which is possible, knight d5. So knight is attacking the bishop on b6 already, because we already moved the the a pawn, and now the pawn is not really defending the bishop how it was defending before from a7 square. So here we have to go more dynamic. We go for a4. And the point is that in case knight goes back, then we have just bishop c5, since the knight already not attacking the bishop on c5. And after knight f3, we're just playing knight g7, getting normal position. We already more than equalized. We're already slightly better because we're ahead in the development. And we have, due to the pawn on a4, we have more space on the queen side. So what happens if knight b6? Well, of course, we are not grabbing so fast on b3, because the point is that our rook is hanging on a8. So we have to take on b6. Knight goes back to d2 and knight f6. Looking at the pawn structure, we might say that okay, our pawn structure is not the best, but the thing is that we're ahead in the development. We're ready to castle, bring the rook to e8, attack the pawn on e4, and we're going to continue this game dynamically, because if we're going to keep the position the way it is, just slowly develop, then we're going to have issues because of the pawn structure. So let's see continuation of here. So in case of f3, which is actually an engine's move, which is not so easy, we castle, queen f2, which is also a bit strange. But of course, it's engine's idea. So d5 can be played, bishop d3, developing the move, knight e5. So the main plan of engine is just to castle as fast as possible, castle, and here we go, bishop b6. Again, we have problems with the pawn structure, that's true, but we have good pieces already in the center, fully developed. Putting pressure on e4 square position is very complex. You can analyze it further if you would like to, but definitely for now it's still equal position, and due to our development advantage, we have a compensation for the pawn structure. So if g3 is played, which feels like more logical to develop the bishop on g2, then we go castle, bishop g2, and here, very important move, d5. Now we're creating a problems for white on e4 square. So in case of the castle, we play rook e8, putting pressure on the e4 pawn. After queen d3, we have bishop g4. And now it is very tough to defend the pawn on e4. Also, the problem is that bishop on c1 cannot develop. And of course, the biggest problem is even though queen gets removed from the e file and there is no pin any longer, but there is an indirect pin, since after take there is bishop e2, which is going to win material. That was knight d5. In case of bishop e3, which looks very logical, trying to defend our good bishop on b6, then the problem here is that we already cannot play. We cannot react in the same way like we would usually. Sorry. For example, by playing knight b4, or by trading and playing knight b4, well, then castle happens and white is very quickly in defending the pawn on c2. So we don't want to get this position. That's why we have to be really dynamic and really concrete, and we play a4. This was like the main idea of the move a5, so that white kind of has to stop it, but okay, if white is not stopping, we have a4. So if knight goes back to d2, again, we are taking, and we play a3. Super important move. Now we're trying to compromise the pawn structure on the queen side, create some weaknesses. And the problem is that we have to play this move very quickly right now, because if we just wait one move, let's say with developing the knight, then a3 is going to follow from white, and then we will never be able to do it. That's why a3 instantly right now. b3 looks very logical, trying to keep the position closed. And now knight f6, bishop b5, pinning our knight. And then we castle. And well, here what white could do, white cannot really go long, castle long, because there is already some pawn structure problems and weaknesses. So let's say castle short, but then we have knight b4 attacking the pawn on c2. It's not so easy to defend, but of course there is rook f to c1. And now after queen e7, basically we have a very nice position on the queen side. There is definitely, like we can say, the e4 pawn is making more space for white, but we should also consider it as a target potentially, and try to break in the center with d5 or prepare. Okay, preparing f5 would be a bit more difficult since our knight is already on f6. But yeah, putting more pressure on the pawn on e4 would for sure make sense. And meanwhile, these pieces are all defending the queen side, so they're kind of pins to the pawns, which is of course very nice for black. So bishop takes on c6, not allowing that knight before jump, physically stopping it. We take with a b pawn, and basically in the next move we're going to bring our pieces to the e file, rook to e file. We're going to put pressure on e4. We could play d5, breaking it. Bishop f5 could also attack. So we're just going to continue attacking the pawn, and for that we're going to have a nice play. Bishop takes b6. The white is trying to play an intermediate move, but the point here is that bishop from b6 is not really attacking anything. So here we are free to take on b3 without compromising our pawn structure. So in comparison to the knight takes on b6, which was also another line we looked. So bishop goes back, white has to keep the bishop. We take on a2, rook a2, rook a2, knight a2. We kind of simplify, we traded some pieces, but we're not having any issues now. Now we go for knight f6, which is supporting the d5 push later in case of knight c3, which is very logically defending on e4 and also controlling the d5. We're going for castle, queen d2, basically trying to open the way for the bishop to develop so that white could go short castle. We go rook e8, immediately targeting the pawn on e4. Bishop d3 looks logical. In case of f3, I would like you to stop here a video and try to find the best move for black. And of course, this move is d5, immediately breaking in the center with the pawn, targeting the e5 pawn and creating some issues due to the pin. So in case pawn takes on d5, we have knight b4. We're not grabbing a pawn. King f2, and then knight f takes on d5, and well, we're putting huge pressure on the bishop. Also, king is in trouble because already cannot really castle, and it's in the center, so we have a very nice position. If knight takes on d5, we take. Queen takes, we are ready to trade everything. And here the point is that we cannot really take on e3 due to king d2, targeting our rook. Rook goes back, he captures on c6, and the problem now we are capturing with the pawn, creating double pawns, and after bishop c4, we are having some issues. White is clearly better here. So that's why knight b4 has to be played. Now we're threatening, of course, to take on e3, but after king d2, we're taking back the pawn on d5, attacking the bishop on e3, and well, overall, we cannot say really much that we're having some huge advantage here or something like this, but we equalize the position. We have an end game. We have more active pieces, so definitely there is at least no problems for black, and also white has to finish the development, so there is some time has to be spent. In case e takes d5, we go knight e7. Now we're going to attack the pawn and grab the pawn next move. And we're not going to have any problems, and the position is completely equal. So bishop g3, trying to develop and defend at the same time. Now the problem would be that d5 is not really working. So in case we push for d5, then in case we would push for d5, then white is going to take, and then we're going to have an issue because our queen will be lost after bishop h7. So very important in this position to play knight b4, attacking the bishop. And since there is no pawn on a file, there is nothing which can kick the knight, so it's great. So we're attacking the bishop. Now castle, we're ready to take the bishop. Queen d3, knight g4, attacking another one, and after bishop d4, we have knight e5, remaneuvering the knight to the perfect square, blockading the pawn on e4. And our next developing moves are going to be bishop e6, f6. We're very solid. We don't have weaknesses, and we're going to see in the future if we are going to try to break with any f5 or d5. But for now, the position is just great. So basically, that was all about the queen e2 move without any, because we will have transposition definitely. So transpositions are coming later. So that was like those were the lines which could happen without transposition. We're going to see, of course, a4 move and some lines with a queen on e2 after the a4 move, which would transpose here. So now after a4, what is the main idea? Of course, is to trap the bishop because the huge threat is a5. So we have to react on it. We play a5 here. So here we can play a5 because, of course, bishop e3 is not a move. So now we stop the pawn, and now we have a square on b4, and we are ready always to jump there. The knight b4 move could be either used as an attack on c2 square or some restricting idea from developing the bishop to e3. Also, it can be used for defending from knight jumps to d5 from white. So let's see what happens after queen e2. So queen e2, white is trying to be flexible. Next move to go knight c3 or bishop e3. So here we are already kind of on time. We play d6. We're just waiting in this position, and we're not developing the knight to f6 because the problem is that the bishop could go to g5 all the way there. So we have two main moves, definitely bishop e3 and knight c3. Okay, bishop e3. So here we don't have knight b4. That's why we have to take. And okay, one more point, that here it would feel like nice to play knight b4, but the problem is that after knight b4, bishop will not go to e3, of course, because of the take. So this is the main idea of the knight on b4, that this idea is working out. But of course, white is not forced, but white could play c3, attacking the knight goes away, and then bishop e3. So that's why knight b4 is making sense only when there is a knight standing on c3 and it's not yet there. So that's why d6 we kind of have to play. So yeah, bishop e3, again, we don't have this idea of knight b4, so we have to take on c3, queen e3. And the point, again, if knight b4, white is going to easily defend on c2, so there is no reason to play that. So we go knight f6 now. Now that the bishop escaped, bishop is not escaped, but bishop got exchanged. There is no more bishop g5 ideas. That's why we can develop knight on f5, and we are ready to castle. Knight c3, very logically. Bishop e6 first, very precisely targeting the knight on b3, and basically saying that in case white is castling right now, there could be issues with the pawn structure. So let's say white is castling nevertheless. So we're going for bishop b3 takes and castle f3 and knight b4. Now knight is a perfect square. We have ideas to attack. Definitely the position looks good for black with attack incoming. In the next move, we're going most likely to put the knight to c5. We can play c6, also preparing some breaks as well, but mostly like controlling the d5 and b5 squares. d5 could be an option later, or b5. So it depends what we want to do and what do we want to break. But yeah, definitely a great position for black. So knight d4. If white is playing knight d4, it's kind of a move which is immediately trying to force something. So the problem is that in case we're going to take on d4 after queen takes, then white would have some more space advantage, and in this particular case we have a tempo move, knight g4, which is attacking the queen immediately and causing some issues. So now the question is what to do. Do you move the queen? Do you take some piece with a knight? In case of knight e6, then we take on e3, knight d8, knight c2, king to knight e1, knight c6. So we follow this forcing line. bc we take here, bishop c4 trying to trap the knight, rook b8, white is taking the knight. There are two pieces for a rook, but the point is that our rook is super active, and we already got two pawns on the rook for two pieces. So this is already great. And well, we're just having an amazing position. I wouldn't say that it's completely winning, but definitely clearly slightly better for black with the chances to win. Again, if someone can win this, it's black. Queen d2, moving the queen away and also defending the knight on d4 at the same time. Then there is no issue. We're going for knight d4, queen d4. We're kind of transposed to the same line, but knight is on g4. And here we go queen g5, defending the pawn on g7, threatening queen e5. And because of the knight on g4, we can do it. Even if h3 is played, we have queen e5 anyway. So we have a really good position. We're absolutely fine. Also stopping the castling opportunity for white. So many good things. In case of knight takes c6, well, we got to take on c6 now, because the other line would not really work out. Queen g3, and here I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black. So here we have very interesting move. Maybe not coming immediately to the mind because because it's a little bit an easy move for queen to make. It's queen b8. That's a way how we attack the pawn and we introduce the queen at some moment to the, let's say, b4 or b6 to the queen side. So our queen is going to be really active like this. We have good position. We don't have really problems. It's white who has to solve the problems in the particular case. So let's see how the game could continue if white, let's say, long castles, for example, here, feeling like the pawn is defended. But now we have queen b6, attacking the pawn on f2, rook d2. Now rook b8. Now we attack here. So white is defending, we're attacking move by move. And after b3, we're ready to castle. Now we also defend g7 just in case to remove the knight from g5. It will from g4 if it will be attacked. But other than that, our king compared to the white's king is much safer. We're going to have some ideas to break, let's say, with the c4, trying to break the position of the king. We could consider at some moment some sacrifices after knight moves away from the g4 square, let's say to e5. So yeah, definitely we have a lot of chances in this position. So that was bishop e3 move. In case knight c3, which is introducing idea of jumping with a knight to d5, then here, of course, we have to play knight b4, stopping both ideas, the knight jumping to d5, and also bishop coming to e3. So now let's look at some lines which can be played. Let's say g3 is played. White wants to castle short, bishop g2, short castle. Knight f6, bishop g2, bishop g4, attacking the queen, very forcing move. Now queen has to go to some strange square, and because the problem is that the pawn on c2 has to be protected. So in case of queen d2, we castle, rook e8, rook e1, and queen d7. And it is very interesting that this position objectively is being evaluated already, that black is winning here. So the problem is for white is that white cannot really finish the development. On the queen side, all the pieces are mostly pieces are on the queen side, which doesn't make much sense. And we're going to have some ideas for an attack against the white's king. Definitely, our knight is great on g4. We have ideas to break in the center as well. So great position for black. f3. So of course f3 is very tempting move to make, but it's problem because it's a move with a pawn which will never go back. And well, it's not good to have such pawn structure which is blocking its own bishop. Now we go back with the bishop to e6 again. Since this pawn was played, since this pawn move was played, we have also weaknesses on the dark squares, stopping the short castle. The bishop from a6 is also targeting the knight on b3. So we have great positions, and white will have some issues because mainly of the bishop on g2 and weaknesses of the dark squares. So it was a g3 move. So now what happens if knight d5? Well, then we take on d5. That's why we play knight d5, then knight b4, sorry, that we are ready to take on d5 with the knight. Pawn takes, and now queen e7, basically. We don't really have any issues. We're ready to trade the queens if white wants, so the d5 pawn will be weak pawn. Really, I mean, not really, not the real issues. Just to mention quickly that knight e7 is also opportunity here. This move would not, this move doesn't trade the queens, so we're kind of ready to go for a short castle, then put the knight, let's say, to g6. Or I mean, also possible to f5, but of course it's also targeting the pawn on d5. Let's not forget about that. So yeah, and just not to trade queens, but queen e7 is also fine. Knight b5. So idea of knight b5 is to kick the knight from b4, and then later play bishop e3 and so on. And the point is, of course, that if we compare it to the line with knight to d5, white has a chance to trade the knights. Here, white doesn't have, black has a chance to trade the knights on d5. Here, black doesn't have chance to do so. So we have to do something, or we don't. We just go for knight f6, immediately just developing the piece, also targeting the pawn on e4. So it's not going to be so easy for white to try to trade our bishop with bishop c3, with bishop e3. So c3 is played. Now the point is, here we have a few moves in the position. We're going for the knight c6, but I would like to mention also that there are moves knight a6 and castle in this position. Let's start with knight a6. Well, then goes bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, castle, long castle now, rook e8, putting the pressure on e4, f3 and d5. We're breaking in the center, attacking pawn on e4. So yeah, great position for black. In case of the castle, then cb4. So we are kind of sacrificing a piece, not kind of, but we are sacrificing. Taking on e4, black is counting on the trick. Kind of the queen cannot really take because of rook e8, but of course white is not going for it. Bishop e3, rook e8. Now knight 5 to d4. Now we grab another pawn. Now we got 2 pawns already for a piece. Queen d1, queen goes back. And now c5, we're starting the push of the pawns. Knight f3, c4, knight d4. And we're getting this position where the king of white managed to castle, but there are some issues definitely. We have a beautiful pawn structure on the queen side, but it's currently blocked, so it's not so easy to push it forward. But generally, later in the endgame, it would be, of course, possible. We could also try to organize attack against the king, so we definitely have a compensation for a piece, but it's not so easy. So that's why I recommend to play knight c6 here. Just removing the knight, not to sacrifice it, but of course you can try if you want to. So now bishop g5, pinning the knight. And this is generally what we were talking about before. That's why we were not really playing knight f6 so early, not to allow this pin. And well, in this position, unfortunately, we cannot really avoid this pin. And okay, generally we would love to, but the thing is that if we have some concrete ways to react on it, then we can, of course, allow it, because in this particular case, we can. So we go with h6. That's pretty much always or often, or in most cases, is a good move, targeting the bishop and see where the bishop goes, because normally white doesn't really want to trade the bishop, and going on h4 feels like at some moment we might have some ideas with g5 to close the bishop on the queen side. So bishop h4 going back. Now, as we were discussing, g5. So first of all, g5 is, of course, very aggressive move and attacking move the bishop on h4. And we're weakening the king on, if it would be on g8, if we would have a short castle. So definitely, if we would have a short castle, this move would not make so much sense, weakening the king so much. But our king is still on e8, we can decide where we will go. And now we're kind of pointing out we will just castle long. So bishop g3, we stopped all these problems on f6, whole diagonal, it's not there. So now queen e7, we're putting more pressure on the e4 pawn. And after f3, we play bishop e6, attacking the knight. We're developing with each move with a tempo, and we're ready already to a long castle. So now knight d4 makes a lot of sense. We take on d4, and in case of knight takes on d4, bishop d7. So that would be a check, but bishop d7 is blocking it, and we're going to castle long in the next move, having nice position. So if c takes d4, the idea of white is having this nice center. So here we go knight h5, bishop f2, and now d5. This position we are slightly better because there is a big problem of white, where white was going to castle, where white is going to develop the pieces, and how. So there are still some issues for white in that regard. As compensation, there is some nice pawn center, but we would say that we are on the better side of the edge here. So that was basically this knight b5 move, and now we're going to look at the bishop f4. This is the main move in the position. The main idea is that white is planning to castle, and bishop e3 is not possible, right? So let's just to point out that bishop e3 takes, queen takes, knight c2. So white would be forced to take with a pawn, doubling the pawn structure, which doesn't make sense. That's why bishop f2, bishop f4, sorry, is the main move, developing the bishop and ready to castle. So now we're kind of have to understand how we react, how do we want to continue the development, and this is a case where we can return to our plan with queen f6. Because first of all, this move is coming with a tempo. We're attacking the bishop, we're ready to play knight g7, and we're ready to see if we castle short or we castle long, but most likely we're going to castle short. So now white has to do something about the bishop. If bishop goes back to g3, then we have a very nice idea, playing queen h6, stopping the castle, at least for a time being. If f4 is played here, which would close the diagonal, then the problem is that we have knight f6. We're just finishing development. And white is kind of in trouble because bishop g4 is a huge threat. So castle is not really working out still. h3 would not help, would not stop it because of the pin. So there is some big problem now for white because we are ready to go short castle and bring the rook, put more pressure on the e4 pawn. So position is already clearly better for black. If queen goes to d2 though, then the main idea for us is to go for the endgame after queen d2, king d2, h5. And now we are seeing that the bishop is on g3, so this is kind of an advantage for us. It's pinned to the pawn on f2 as well, because it has to defend it. What could be a possible continuation here? Well, h4, stopping, of course, h4 from black is very logical. Bishop e6, developing a piece, threatening at some moment some take on b3. Rook d1, knight f6, king c1, white castled artificially, as we can see. Bishop takes b3, cb, and knight g4. We have very beautiful knights located on b4 and g4. I would say a position is definitely at least slightly better for black due to beautiful knights, and well, there is not much good, I would say, that white has in the position. Besides, we can point out bishop pair, but the position is not so opened for it to be relevant here. So bishop g3 is possible, but queen d2 is better, defending the bishop with a queen move, not allow any queen a6 action. So here we kind of feel like that we have a tactics because the bishop is hanging on f4 and the queen is defending both. Something should fall, so knight c2 is interesting, but the problem is going to be a huge mistake since after queen takes f4, knight d5 attacking c7 and queen on a4, as well as bishop b5 is a huge threat. So the position is already getting much worse for black. That's why we have to play bishop e6 just to continue the development. Now the threat is in the picture because there is no knight d5 like it would be in the other line. So short long castle has to be played. Knight c2 is not hanging any longer. Knight e7, king b1, removing the king just in case. Now h6. The main idea is stopping bishop g5 ideas because the knight would hang in case of long castle. So bishop b5 check. We can just block it by playing c6. Bishop goes back. Now there is kind of an issue with the pawn on d6, but we have long castle defending the pawn on d6. If bishop takes, we have knight g6 here, and the problem is that bishop is not going to be surviving here on d6 due to this deadly pin on the queen. At least pawn is going to fall, but it looks like the bishop also going to fall, so it's clearly better position for black. So we looked at the queen e2 line. Now we're going for the knight c3. So it's after a4, a5. So now knight c3, we're most likely going to transpose. So we play knight b4 as well. Like we already mentioned, we're immediately covering the d5 square, so there are no knight d5 ideas. So in case queen d2, d6, we're going to transpose to the line of queen e2, and we already discussed it before. And in case of bishop f4, which was actually never played, but okay, it's like the top move from the computer, that's why we kind of have to check it. Here we go, in case we go queen f6 here, which would be a logical move to attacking the bishop like in the previous line. Here there is queen d2, and after again knight c2, queen takes, knight d5, queen d6. It feels like we're defending everything, but here knight d4, and knight is already ready to jump to b5, f5. If bishop takes b4, the problem is that knight c7, king d8, knight 8, queen b4, and king d1, and this knight is going to get out. So that's why we go for d6 here. We're not allowing this position. So queen d2. And the problem now is that compared to the other position which we had, white already committed to queen e2 and then played queen d2 defending the bishop. So now going for queen f6 would be actually loss of the time, because in this particular case white is faster. So that's why we have to give up on the long castle plan and go for knight f6. White is going long castle, short castle, f3, defending the pawn on e4, introducing ideas of pushing the g pawn. Bishop e6, g4, now d5 break. We always ready. That's kind of one of the main ideas for black, to go for d5 or f5 break at some moment when we are ready. So g5, knight h5, attacking the bishop from on f4. Bishop goes back to e3, and now c6. We're defending the pawn. We're not yet ready to take on e4. We are still trying to keep the position a bit unclear here in the center. Position is pretty complex here. How it could continue, let's say if white is going f4, it doesn't really work, because here we take on e4, on e4, and the problem is that white cannot really reply to this move due to the problems with the diagonal, with this beautiful diagonal. So if knight c5, which would attack the bishop, attack the pawn, then we go queen e7, defending everything. And after knight e6, we go bishop takes, because bishop was hanging on b3. Let's not b6. Let's not forget about this. Bishop is3, queen is 3. Now we take on e6, and now we have an idea to play e5 and control the dark squares, which is very nice because there is no dark square bishop for white any longer. It has been traded. The f4 square would be also important, and some pawns could be weaknesses. So yeah, definitely a complex position, but not bad for black. So if king goes to b1 now, trying to be very prophylactic and useful, we are ready to take on e3. Since after queen e3 we have queen c7, again controlling the dark squares, ready to jump with a knight or with a queen to f4 at some moment, ready to bring the queens to the semi-open files and put more pressure in the center. So now we go to the main move, which is bishop e2. Very developing move, very normal one. There is a threat, of course, of f4. That's the main idea of this move, the main critical idea. So we have to do something. And for example, if we play g6, which would make sense, then after f4, we have a chance to jump with knight back to g7, which is not bad. It's an interesting move. But we're going for bishop e3. Bishop e3, queen e3, and now queen c7. Now we're controlling the f4 square, and anytime knight is ready, jump to f4. That's why white has to stop it, playing e5, stopping the idea of knight f4. And now again, f4 is the problem, is a threat from white. So here we go for c5. We're sacrificing a pawn, because in case of queen takes on c5, we can retake the pawn on e5. And if knight takes, then we have rook c8, putting the pieces on this very nice c file. In case of knight b3, we have knight e2, very nice move, using the fact that there is a pin on c2 pawn where it's going to be a checkmate. So king b1, we take on c3, take, we grab everything, and we won back the pawn with very nice position, potentially a big threats on the c2 pawn can happen. Also, knight can jump to f4. So knight takes e6, removing the bishop. Then we go for fe. And again, we are controlling the f4, and knight is ready to jump. Again, we lost a pawn, but there is a full compensation due to the weaknesses, the weak squares. Knight is ready to jump to f4. We are ready to attack on the c file, so it's great position for black. That was bishop f4, which was never played. Now we go for bishop c4, which is very typical considering the plan of queen e2, bishop e3, which currently cannot be played any longer since the c2 is weak. So white is trying to be flexible with the plans and go for the bishop c4. So now the thing is that we go with our main flexible move, the d6. If we go with a knight on f6, which is of course possible, the problem is, as in the previous line we were discussing, in case of short castle, we don't have opportunity of queen coming to h4. That's why d6, we're going first, postponing the idea of knight f6, and ready to jump with the queen to h4 in some lines. So let's say castle here. But yeah, now the problem is that we have to be fast. I believe that here we cannot really march that fast with the queen to h4 due to some issues on f7. This is a difference from that we already looked at similar in this line. So knight f6. And the only point here is that after bishop g5, we're getting the position which we didn't really want to get. But let's first start with the h3 move, because this move is a bit slow move, but okay, it's stopping some ideas with knight jump and bishop come to g4. Then we have time now, and since h3 is played, we can also play h6, stopping the bishop g5 idea, which is kind of annoying. So rook e1, castle, bishop goes to e3, bishop s3, rook s3, and now bishop e6. Position is completely equal. We managed to equalize, ready to trade the bishops. And okay, again, we can talk about the potential play. Let's say, since the pawn is still on e4, the main ideas for black are going to still remain to put more pressure on the e pawn, bringing the rook to the e file, and most likely we will bring the a rook. And this rook is going to be remained here, since we can later start pushing for the f5 or d5. d5 is going to be very difficult, but we can try it. So d5 and maybe c6, d5, or f5 could be ideas later. So bishop g5 is kind of the only problem or only question in this line. What is happening? Because of knight f6. Here h6, we're immediately asking question for white, sorry. And now after queen h4, we again have an idea of g5. Since we're not castled yet, short, we can go for this weakening, since we're not yet weakening the king, and we are ready at some moment to go for long castle. So bishop goes back to g3, we go for h5, threatening to trap the bishop. h3 kind of forced, h4, bishop h2, and now g4, breaking the position of the king. We're ready to go for g3 even, or take on h3. So if e5 is being played, which is very logical, because since our king is in the center, white has to try to open up. We go g3, we're in time, because after pawn takes on f6, we take on h2 with a check, king h1, not allowing to open up and hiding behind this pawn. We play queen f6, taking the pawn, and we are ready in the next move to put the king on f8, where it's going to be kind of safe. We have a very nice bishop looking at the king side. We're going to develop as well the other bishop. We have a bishop pair, and we have big chances to attack the white's king, which is on the king side. That was a4. Of course, many lines from a4 also could transpose the main line. So now we're going into the main line, knight c3. So this is like the most flexible move, how white can start this position. And here we are going with queen f6. Now, the thing is, now we don't have to be anymore like tricky with the d6 move. Or like playing in the tricky way. Here we can already go with the queen to f6, because it's clear what white is going to do. This move is not the main move, by the way. Let's discuss it a little bit. This is the third popular move. In this position, a knight f6 and d6 are the main options for black. And yeah, first of all, we're developing the queen to f6. We want to go with a knight to e7. d6 is always going to be our other move, and also a5 at some moment would be a move. So in case queen goes to d2, which doesn't make any sense, stopping the development of the bishop, we're going for knight g7, bishop d3, d6, castle, and we're going knight e5. So yeah, that was a little bit strange from white, because white is allowed us to develop without any problems. We are ready even to take the bishop on d3 at some moment, and ready to attack the king potentially in the future. So what happens if queen f3? Well, this is a move which is not really bringing, much for white, because it gives a chance for us to comfortably equalize. Because after d6, bishop e3, bishop e6. So in case of long castle, we have knight e5, and now already there are some issues for white. Even after trade of the queens, there's going to be some issue in the endgame. So queen f6, knight f6, bishop f6, trying to spoil a bit the structure, but this is a perfectly fine structure. Even with double pawns, all pawns are together. Long castle, well, and we're getting into this endgame where we're going to play for the e4 pawn. We're going to try to put more pressure on it by bringing the rooks to the e file. And we're going to go for the d5 break to either trade off both of the central pawns or put more pressure on e4. So position is just equal. So f4, trying to be very, very ambitious here. White is controlling most of the squares, like in the center, and well, first of all, controlling the e4, e5 square and threatening some e5 ideas. But the problem is that weakening a lot, and we already have bishop on b6, which is beautifully located in this particular case. So we're going for knight g to e7. We're developing and stopping knight d5. Let's not forget knight d5 is always a threat when there is knight c3. So if e5, then we have queen g6. Tricky move, because now we're first of all keeping an eye on g2 square, which is the bishop has to defend. We are ready in the next moves to go for d6. We develop the bishop, bring the knight to b4. Short or long castle, it's going to depend what white is doing. So if knight goes to a4, attacking our bishop on b6, which makes a lot of sense. We're just going to short castle, because after takes, we're just going to recapture with the pawn pretty comfortably. Bishop e2, then d5 break. We're trying to punish white for this f4 move. And in case of e takes d4, we have rook d8, putting pressure and pinning the pawn because of the queen on d1. And after c4, we have d5. We're breaking everything. And we're just basically, we're just crushing white here. So in case of e5, which makes also a lot of sense, attacking the queen with a tempo, then here we have a check, queen h4, g3, and then queen h3. Now we're stopping the opportunity of castle for this moment. So bishop f1 looks like very logical move. Attacking the queen on h3, we go with the queen back to h6. So if white would play something like f5 would not really bring so much sense, because after f5 there is a g5 move, and our position looks very, very interesting. It feels unusual. The problem for white, they cannot really go g4 because it would weaken the h4 square. And other than that, the pawns looks very, very very strong and scary, but they're actually not, because they're currently targeted by both our pieces, and we are ready to capture one by one. That was knight e4. In case of queen e2, continuing the idea, which, okay, doesn't really make so much sense after f4. But okay, of course, it's possible. We go for a5. Again, similar idea. We threaten to play a4. And also, in case of a4 from white, we can also play knight b4 idea. Our knight b4. So bishop e3 is the critical approach, but now we again have a4. We're going dynamic play, takes. We grab a pawn on b5, weakening the pawn structure. In this particular case, we could have actually taken on b3, similar to the other line we looked already, but there would be bishop takes on c7, so it's unclear. But now we have a very nice idea, due to our queen standing on f6 compared to the other line. So now here, there is knight d2, and after knight d2, a3 is the move. attacking the pawn on b2, using the fact that our queen is attacking the knight as well, so pawn cannot really go to b3. The only move is actually for white is castle here, which is also it's not so trivial and it's like a bit dangerous, right? Castling into the open position, open file. So we take on b2, king takes, and now d6, and we're stopping the e5 idea. According to objective evaluation, this position is equal, but I would be really scared to play this position with such king on b2. So I would say definitely black has a lot of chances here. That was queen e2, and now we go for queen f3. Well, this is the most common move in this position, and actually the move which we're going to play was not really played, and we are... this refutation was not yet played in the over the board game, so hopefully some of you guys is going to use it in the over the board game and refute this line, because here we can go for d5 immediately. We're having better development. We're using the fact that we can target the pawns in the center, that white used this time to play f4. And now there are many issues for white, because taking on d5 would not really work, since after knight b4, we're attacking c2 and d5. So in case of bishop d3, there is bishop f5, putting even more pressure on c2, since after trade, we can also put more pressure on c2 as well. So in case knight takes on d5, we just take, pawn takes, and knight b4, pretty much the same. But here there is an opportunity for white for check, knight with bishop b5, c6. We have to stop the check. Queen e4, another check. King goes away, threatening rook e8, by the way. After queen b4, cb5. So we traded the pieces now. Next move, we're going to have the rook coming to e8. King cannot castle, king is stuck in the center, so the position is completely lost for white. If queen e4 here, we could have played queen e7 to defend the knight, but we are not doing it. We're playing king d8, similar like in previous line, just giving up a piece, whole piece here. And here we're going for rook e8, and black is just winning here. Let's look at a couple of lines, because maybe it's not so clear, but let's try to see. So in case of king d2, we go bishop e3, attacking the king, bishop g4, and now take on e2, king it takes, and we are winning the queen. Pretty much easy. If king d1, which makes more sense, definitely, then we go bishop g4, king d2, and bishop e3. King goes forward, bishop f5, king f4, and basically we're just going to pick up a queen and checkmate. So if bishop e2, which makes the most sense, we have bishop g4, and the pawn is going to fall. We're going to get material. So that was the bishop e2 move. All right. Okay, and that was in case happens with the knight on d5. In case of bishop d2, white is trying to castle very, very quickly without this bishop e3 move. But the problem is after de, knight takes, there is queen g6. And now white cannot really castle, because after castle, there is going to be bishop g4. There is a pin, and white is losing material. So let's say h3, white has to try to stop the bishop g4 move. But now we go a5. And the problem is that a4 is a big threat. We're also threatening to play something like f5, and we have big initiative and attacking opportunities in this particular case. So let's go back. That was bishop d2, and now let's see what happens after e5. e5 makes a lot of sense, because it's also move which white is playing with a tempo, attacking our queen. So we have to know how to respond to it. So we go queen h4, attacking, king with a check. So now queen g3. If queen trade happens, then we're just going for knight b4, and after bishop g3, bishop g4. Well, we're getting actually completely bad endgame for white. The problem is that, okay, taking on h7 doesn't really work out. So, and because of all the problems on the c2, and well, the bishops are just monsters for black, and position is already winning. So g3 looks like a logical move, but here we're going for bishop g4 intermezzo, attacking the queen on f3. And we're ready to trade the queens if white's taking, but if queen goes back to d3, then we have queen h4. Next move, we're ready to go for bishop f3 or bishop f5. These are the threats. Also, the knight can come forward to b4, attacking the queen. Oops, sorry. Attacking the queen and the pawn on c2. We can short castle as well, and well, position is completely crushing. Okay, that was an f4 move. So now queen e2, we're going for the main line. We are transposing in a way. Now queen e2, defending the pawn on f2, because of course it's very logical. We are attacking the pawn. White has to defend. And what white is also doing is introducing idea of knight d5 in the position, which would target the queen and the bishop on v6. So again, similar position what we had in the other line. We transposed actually from one of the lines. So here we go knight e7. We have to stop the idea of knight coming to d5. We played queen f6. We're ready to go knight g7. We are just continuing the development, stopping knight d5. Very, very logical move. So here there are again many moves from white. They can try to transpose the main line, but they also can try out something new. Let's say if d3, white decides to fianchetto the bishop on g2, then we go for a5, our typical idea with threat of a4. In the case of a4 plate, we go knight before ourselves, stopping the idea of bishop e3, bishop g2, castle, and d6. We're getting very decent position. It's kind of complicated, we can say it. We can put it like this because of this pawn on e4. But it can not only bring space for white, but it also could be a weakness later. So it could be a target. And we could try to, we can try later to attack the pawn with the pawn breaks. Even though in this position, I would say that seeing the pawn is on e4, it's also restricting the bishop. So it could be fine standing there like that. If a4 is played by white first, in this particular order, so normally we respond to a4 move with playing a5, but in this particular order, you have to understand why. Here we cannot really play a5, because if we go for a5, the problem is bishop e3 is possible. And after bishop takes, queen takes, knight comes before, we're targeting c2, but after long castle, king is defending the square, there is no issues. So that's why here it's very important to memorize the move. I mean, not memorize, but understand that, okay, it's not working because of bishop e3 coming immediately. That's why in this position we have to play knight d4. We're solving the problems because, okay, a5 is a huge threat. Definitely, we should not forget about that. And we have to do something about the bishop. a5 is not working again because of bishop e3, so we have to play knight d4. Knight d4, of course, is a move attacking the queen, targeting the knight. So knight d4 looks like a logical move. Bishop d4, now we are putting pressure on the knight on c3. And after bishop d2, we play a6 now. Now, not only we introduce, the ideas of bishop coming back at some moment, there is going to be a square on a7, but also it is stopping the knight coming to b5, so there are no these jumps. And well, the problem is that after castle, which white is planning, of course, because everything is pointing out on the castle, we will have ideas later to attack with the b5. So let's start with castle, which is possible. Here, of course, queen f2. For tactical reasons, castle immediately is not really working. So f3, defending the pawn on f2 and getting ready to castle. Now we go d6, our normal move. We're continuing the development. We have to do something. We have to develop the bishop and also blocking the e5 breaks at any moment. So h4, white is starting to attack right away, not even castling. So we play bishop e6, g4, threatening g5, going all the way forward. And now we're kind of tricking white and going long castle. And well, of course, white will not castle short. Okay, for a few reasons. First, the bishop is blocking the king. Second, there is like this weaknesses of the king side happen. So yeah, we have a pretty secured king, sorry, on the queen side, and yeah, very good position without any problems. So if castle happens right away, we're going for the b5 break. We're sacrificing a pawn, but we're opening up the a file. So here, basically, we can say that if white is just taking everything, there is always the rook a8 move, rook a1, sorry, move. So it's going to be very difficult. We'll place the bishop on e6, castle short. We're threatening already to take on a4 or push forward with b4. We're going to see. It's going to depend how white is reacting, definitely. But yeah, huge attacking chances for black. f4, another move. So f4 is trying not to be too solid as f3, but with f4, getting a lot of space at the same time, threatening some e5 ideas in the position, and well, just stopping also the idea of taking on f2 and introducing the long castle. The thing is that even though white got a lot of space in the center, our development is still faster. And here we are ready to go with a very nice d5. Immediate strike in the center, also a pawn sacrifice because white could win a pawn. In case ed happens, we have h5. First of all, we're stopping any ideas of like h3, g4, but also we are introducing idea of bishop g4, controlling the light squares, and white cannot really castle long due to this bishop g4. So now h3 trying to stop the idea of bishop g4, but now we have queen h4. Queen h4 check, and there is no real way to block the check, so king d1 has to be played, and now castle short. And basically, king of white that didn't manage to long castle, staying in the center. We sacrifice a pawn, but for that we have a huge lead in the development and very nice position. Later in the game, we can try to win the pawn on d5 back, but white will never get their castling opportunity, so white will have to do something like maybe put the king somewhere like this, or bring the rook from the a3 from the third rank. It's very difficult to see how white is continuing here. In case of knight takes on d5, well, we have to take with knight on d5, pawn takes, and there is an discovered check right now. So we have to do something about it. If we're putting the queen on e7, we're going to trade the queens. The position is going to be unclear, but we have a king d8, the better option. We're threatening to play rook e8, winning the queen. At the same time, we're attacking the pawn on b2. So there are two threats at the same time. It's not so easy to reply here. So that's why this line is actually very, from human eye, going into the line with white, it was going to be very, very dangerous. So that's why, but it's the best line according to the engine. So the point is that here after castle, bishop b2, king b1. So white has to go. White is first to go for this line. Bishop a3, and here queen e5. Very important move. The only way to defend for white. And here after queen b6, king a2, we have bishop e7 coming back. Our bishop is coming to f6. Very messy position here, but our king is going to be much safer. But okay, it's still in the center. Let's not forget about this. Maybe some d6 break could happen. But definitely the white's king is very unsafe. There are many tricks already. Bishop f6 with a checkmate threat are coming. Maybe some rook e8 later in the game. Maybe I'll try to artificially castle the king somewhere on b8. But it's going to be difficult with the rook on a8 as well. So very complex position, tough to say much. But again, white has to play very precise and give up a pawn to get this position. So it's very unlikely that human is going to play as strong as an engine. That was a4 move. Now we go for h4. h4 is also interesting idea. The main point is that white wants to develop with a bishop to not to e3, but to g5 with some nice nasty threats because it would target the knight on e7. So the point also is that many times there could be some e5 breaks. We have to be ready for those. So we have to play d6. Now d6, we're ready to play bishop d7 and long castle. So in case of bishop e3, which would not really make so much sense because h4 is played, but let's say here we play h6. So our idea is, of course, that we don't allow this bishop g5 move, and the idea is that after bishop takes e3, queen takes e3, there is the g4 going to hang in case Vice is going for this g4 break. So castle, long castle, which makes which is logical. Now we go bishop d7, just developing the piece. Even though it may look more passive than the bishop move to e6, but the problem with the e6 that after knight is coming to d5, we would like to capture the knight on d5, and if we capture it, would create a fork. So that's why it's better to have bishop on d7 so that we can capture on d5 without any issues. So if f3 is played, castle king b1, and now king b8, also removing the king a little bit, putting it more in the safety. We are ready to challenge the e4 pawn with the f5 break. Also g5 is possible. And well, we're just having a good position for black. We can say we equalized it, because of course with this black you're always trying to equalize and then create potentially some stress. But yeah, we managed to equalize the position and having decent chances in the middle game. Knight d5 jump, it's pretty rare. So the main idea is, of course, to trade with the knights on d5, which is happening takes. And here, very important, here we have two moves, which is knight e7 and knight d5. The thing is, knight e5 might feel very scary, but the problem is with knight e7 that after knight e7, bishop g5, bishop g5, queen e5, queen takes, pawn takes, and a4. This position is pretty unclear, and it looks like a slightly better endgame for white. So that's why we are putting the knight on e5, because it's working out. This move is working out. We shouldn't worry about f4, even though at the first glance it looks like very scary. f4 is not really working. So if bishop g5 is played here, we just remove the queen to g6, and f4 we have bishop g4. Queen will have to go, but wherever a queen goes, we will just play queen e4 and win this game. So f4 looks like the most critical move, attacking our knight. There is a pin. We have to do something, and we play bishop g4. Again, we have the same move. So now if pawn takes the knight, we're playing queen f5. We sacrifice the piece, but we are having very, very strong bishops, and again leads in the activity of the pieces. So if queen goes to d2, we play short castle and ready to bring new attacker, new rook in the position with rook e8. So if queen f4, we're playing queen c2. Of course, we don't want to trade the pieces because we're sacrifice the whole piece. So in case of queen g4, it's a checkmate, of course. That's why white cannot do it. But bishop d2 looks like a logical play, just trying to stop the ideas of checkmate. And now we go rook a8. The thing is, we are not forced to give up the bishop. So in this position, we can also play h5 if you are a bit afraid to trade to give up another piece, because we already sacrificed one. We can go for this line. It's also good. But rook a8 is even more unpleasant for white. We're sacrificing another piece. Let's say white is taking queen g4, rook e5, bishop e2, and rook f8. We're just going to win the queen for two rooks. We're going to have very interesting material imbalance and very interesting position where we're going just to attack because of the problem of the king, of the safety of the king. So let's see the line which can happen. Rook c1, we take, we win the queen, but looking at the material, we're having very strange position where we have queen, 3 pawns for 2 rooks and a knight, which materially speaking is the same, But it's very interesting because normally you have like queen and a piece or something like this. So there is no like queen and 3 pawns. So queen and 3 pawns for 2 rooks and a knight. And the king is in the center. In order for white to be better, white has to try to attack our king, but our king is completely safe. Okay, there is back rank issues which are easily solvable. But white is the one who has issues with the king. So there is definitely a clear advantage here for white in this endgame. And that was knight d5 move, which is again pretty rare. So here bishop g5 immediately is also possible. So attacking the queen on f6, potentially also looking at the knight on e7. We go queen e6 now. So this is a bit better square than on g6 in this case, because now we are prepared fully against the knight coming to the e5. And well, now after, let's say, long castle, we're going for f6, getting rid of this bishop on g5, which is a bit annoying, ready to step away with the queen to develop our other bishop to e6 or d7. So if bishop goes to e3, bishop d7, g3, and after long castle, it's going to be hard to say what position is better for black with pawn on b6 or pawn on a7. So if bishop takes on b6, we take, and after bishop h3, we just go f5 here, breaking the central pawn, the e5 the e4 pawn, and now we kind of equalized already. We're going to step away with the queen from the pin, and yeah, the position is good. There are still chances for both sides in this game. The bishop g3, bishop h3 immediately. Then we have to first take on e3. We have to do this. Queen takes, and now queen f7. So now the point is the f5 is not really couldn't really happen at the previous move. But in this particular case, we are already ready to go for it. We are preparing. We are ready to bring the rooks in the game. It's going to be difficult for white to stop it. And if white is going to stop it in any way, then there are will be some other weaknesses. So we're on equal position with the ideas of putting pressure on e5 and breaking with f5. So that was the h4 variation. So if knight d5 is jumping on d5, which is not the most popular move, but it's possible, of course. So knight's attacking the queen, attacking the bishop with a tempo. We have to take knight takes d5, pawn takes. We get similar position. We already discussed it, but not exactly the same because now there is no pawn on d6. So now that's kind of the biggest problem of this variation, that knight e5 is not going to work because after f4 we don't have bishop f4. Bishop g4 is in the previous line. That's why it's very easy now to remember and understand the moves. And again, one of the most important things is to understand the moves and not to remember. Then you don't have to recall everything like this. So knight e7 has to be played, basically the only move. And here, in case of a4, we stop it with the a5, and after h4, we play h6, stopping the bishop coming to g5, and we kind of transpose the h4 line. So h4, h6. h4, of course, the main idea is to bring the bishop to g5, bring the rook from h3 to on the third rank somewhere to e3 or f3. So we have to stop the bishop g5. This is the critical move now. Otherwise, we're going to be almost lost. So h6. So bishop g5 anyway, trying to use the ideas of, some pin on the rook, but after hg, which is a tempo, we have a nice queen takes f2, check, intermezzo, and after trade happens, we're just taking the rook on h1 and we're just winning the game. If g4 is played, which would be very logical because the threat could be its element to push for g5, but the point is in this line that the pawn is not going to be actually so dangerous. The bishop would be more dangerous because it's going to attack both the queen and the knight on e7. So here we can continue our development playing d6, if g5, queen f5. Of course, now we're not taking on g5. So queen f5, attacking the pawn on d5. And well, we're just getting a slightly better position, and due to these pawns and with the sound, we can of course try to take them, but yeah, we're going to be. I mean, again, we're having more active pieces, and it's hard for white to finish the development. While it's going to be very easy for us to play something like bishop d7 and the castle, since the knight on e7 is going to be a poisonous one. So yeah, tough. And also, actually, wait, just let me come back for a moment in this position. Queen takes d5 and bishop e6 is also a big threat, just blocking all kind of ideas of attack on e7. Rook h3, trying to bring the rook from the third rank to the e3 square to the f3, and yeah, bishop g6 is not really working out. So here we go d6, attacking the queen, attacking the rook. Sorry, rook f3 looks very logical, attacking our queen. Now we have to play bishop f5. So the main idea here is that g4 is not really working, because after g4 we can just take a pawn, and after rook f6, bishop e2, we're just getting a winning position. And after queen b5, we're just playing c6, stopping the check. In case of dc, we take the rook, because after cb, bishop d7, pawn takes on a8 and promote queen a8. And we're just having a huge in the development in this position. Materially speaking, the position is equal, but activity is much better for black. So in case rook takes here on f6, we're just capturing on b5, bishop b5, and now king f8. If rook d6, bishop b7, bishop c7, and rook is trapped on d6. So that's why rook f4 can be tried. And now we are having f5, where the rook is actually trapped on the f4 square. The pawns on d5 and h4 are weakness. I mean, there are many weaknesses for white. And the position, the endgame is very good for blacks, clearly better. So a4, trying to create a threat of a5, critical move. So now we kind of transpose this a4 line. We are first h4 and then a4. So now we go a5, where now we have to stop. But the problem is that there are some issues. Now that the pawn is on a5 and the knight is not on c3, there could be ideas of playing bishop, bishop d2, targeting the pawn. And well, it's going to be a bit more difficult to long castle later, since the pawn will need some protection on a5. And also, there is no more like the defender of the bishop on b6. Then after, for example, some let's say check on b5, we would not be able to play c6. So that's not going to be a move any longer, because we will play d6, and then in case of the check, the c6 is not going to be a move. So yeah, it's going to be a bit more difficult. And but anyway, we had to stop the a4. So in case of bishop g5 again, we're having the similar idea as well as in previous line. We're just winning material and the game, obviously. So c4 is another opportunity, trying to create a threat of the f5, of the c5. Of course, we have to stop it, playing d6. Now g4, trying to create another threat. The white is creating threat after threat, which makes a lot of sense. Queen g6, we're moving the queen away. Now we don't want to allow it. In case of bishop h3, we just castle, because after queen takes e7, we have an intermezzo bishop g4, and we are coming with the next move with any of the rook to the e file, and white is in a huge trouble. g5, then we're taking, bishop takes, and f6. We're in time to target the bishop. So yeah, it's working. And in case of rook g1, then we go h5, immediately pointing out that bishop pawn cannot really take because of the rook is hanging. So bishop g5, also creating a checkmate threat. Let's not blunder that. f6, now pawn takes on h5. We trade the pieces, and well, we're getting into the end game. Bishop will have to move now. There is a problem on h4. Problem on h4, problem on g5. We have a weakness on g7, but we will be able to defend it in some way, playing king f7 or g6. So yeah, we're getting better, slightly better position in the endgame. In case of bishop e3, we have to trade, because if we're letting white take, then there we would have bad pawn structure. Bishop e3, queen e3, and queen b2. We're taking the pawn. d6 is the only way how white can stop our development, because if d6 is not played, we have always the d6 ourselves and developing the bishop and quickly castle. So d6, cd, and rook h3. So again, rook h3 now is possible because there is no bishop takes. Queen e5, we're coming back with the queen, and after a long castle, we are castling short because we have to finish the development as fast as possible. Position is complicated here. We are up 2 pawns, but we are behind in the development because of the bishop on c8. Also, the king of white is weaker. Very, very messy position, but playable for black, definitely. Computer would say it's objectively around equal, but of course it's tough to play for humans. So yeah, I mean, but we have a material advantage, and in the next moves we can try to prepare d5, d6, trying to get the bishop out. In case queens are traded, also b6 bishop. So develop this bishop in some way, but we'll for sure lose at least one of the pawn which we won. So that would be okay, because we are not holding to material. We need also to develop. Rook h3 immediately. It's one of them. On the big differences to play this move after a4, a5 is included. So basically, it's very, very nice move. And now we have to react. We have to react very precise. If we play d6 in this position, it would be a best move. We play this position. We play in this position d6, but without the a4 and a5 being included. And the problem is that here, with inclusion of this move, it's not really working so well, since after rook f3, if we play the same way with like bishop f5, black could still go for g4, but after take, queen b5 is a tempo. And now if c6 is played, okay, there is first of all, now the bishop is hanging, but of course white is taking on c6. We are taking on f3, and after cb, bishop d7, queen takes, queen b6. At the end of the line, the bishop is hanging on b6. And that's why we're getting lost here, because we're already down the whole piece in this position. So that's why this very tricky move order, first including a4. So first playing h4, then a4, and yeah, it's a little bit tricky, but we have to know how to handle it. So that's why d6 is not working. We have to find a better approach, and we found it. We have to go king d8. Looks like not such a good move, just removing the king, but there are too many threats right now from white, and we have to include our own threats. For example, now rook e8 is coming with some ideas of opening on the e file. So rook f3, let's try to continue the same way. Now bishop f5 is not possible, but knight f5 is possible. First of all, removing the knight from the e file, introducing the rook to e8, targeting the king and the queen. Of course, currently it's not such a big deal because pieces can block on e3, but it's definitely a huge threat. So now after g4, let's say, which would be a huge blunder, we have rook e8 immediately pointing out that this is a problem. Knight takes e3, and if rook takes f6, knight c2, queen cannot take, king is in trouble. We are ready to take the queen. We are ready to take the rook. So yeah, we are getting into this position. Yeah, pretty happy, and I believe we're winning a lot of material here. Queen d3, trying to attack on f5 with the rook and with the queen. So now we go for queen e7. We are going out of the pin using the check. Now, king d1 looks like the best move here, because if white is going to put any piece like bishop coming to e3, then we're going to take the pawn structure is going to get weakened. Also, the pawn on h4 is hanging, so it's not really working. So king d1 is forced. And now rook e8, introducing a checkmate on e1, white has to react, playing bishop e2 logical, developing and defending. Now knight h4. We're taking the pawn, attacking the rook. Now d6. Actually, the whole line is holding also on this move of playing d6. If white is not finding this move, then black is going to be better. Or even just not only better, but just completely winning. But in this particular, so d6 has to be played to stop the development of the pieces. It's very much needed. So if queen d6 we take, rook f7, then this position is already slightly better for white. So here we must take with a pawn. We cannot trade the queens. Bishop e3, bishop c5 now. Very strong move. Not trading the bishops first, because that would allow rook e3, placing the bishop to c5. In case of queen b5, which is targeting the bishop on b6, we have to play bishop c7. Rook e3, now queen f6, removing the queen, rook e8, king 8, and queen e2 check, we go king f8. Very messy position. We would love to develop our pieces, but if we play b6 and bishop b7, the problem is that bishop on b6 is going to have some problems, but we will have to play something like d5 later, trying to open up the position. Again, pretty messy position. We're up 2 pawns here. Again, white still hasn't really finished the development fully, also has some issues. So definitely due to the material advantage, there are going to be chances in the endgame, but we have to be also very careful here. So that was this rook h3 line, including the a4, a5, which is a very nice one. So bishop d2 is another try from white, very interesting. The main idea is, of course, to put the bishop. So since bishop g5 didn't work out, so white is trying to put the bishop to c3. But the point is that white is giving up a pawn on b2. So it's saying you can take the pawn, and we're accepting that queen takes b2. Our queen is about to have a very nice journey, but don't worry, it's going to return back. So rook h3. Now bishop c3 is a huge threat. We have to take on c2. We grab another pawn. If rook g3 here, we have d6. We are giving up a pawn on g7 because, okay, we took enough pawns. It's enough for us. And after queen f3, we have queen f5 returning back. And after this, we're just going to develop the bishop, finish the development with the king, castle somewhere. And, okay, most likely not on the king side because of the problem, but queen side, and well, we're just up 2 pawns. We're having great positions. So rook c1, then queen g6. Finally, we returned with a queen, bishop c3, introducing a threat of rook g3. We have to be really careful. Now d6. We give back the pawn on g7. We're not afraid of it because we already won 2 pawns. So rook g3, we go away with queen f5, bishop takes, rook g8, and bishop f6. Now, the threat is, of course, to take on e7 and checkmate, and also at the same time, the rook on g8 is hanging, and it might feel at the first glance position is completely losing, but the very nice move is coming for black, which is bishop e6, sacrificing a piece, but we're taking the bishop back. Now, the most important part is that the knight is defending the rook. The rook is not under attack, so after ef, we take with a queen. And we're defending the rook on g8 again. And again, we're entering the position where we are up a pawn. We are ready to finish our development, like we can say long castle. And again, due to the extra pawn and normal position, not so much worse in the development, we have good chances for a win. That was rook c1. So d6, this is a very important move, as we were discussing in the other line, as well as here. Before we can play d6, white has to start with a d6 move themselves, pushing for it and trying to stop our developments. After cd, rook c1, queen f5. Now there are ideas of bringing the queen to e5 or to e6 to break the spin, since rook cannot go to e3 due to the bishop on b6 guarding the square. So bishop e3, the main idea, of course, if we take, then rook is going to retake. We don't have much then to take, so we take, rook takes, and now queen f6, defending the knight on e7. So the next moves where we would like to finally finish the development with our bishop, finally find a way to go for the d5, d4, potentially d6, d5. We will see where our pawns are going to be. So g4, white is going forward. We go d5, bishop g2, attacking, and then d4. And well, if the rook goes to e4, we have d5, and we develop the bishop. And also now we're winning because the rook is hanging on e5. So in case knight d4 here, we are castling because after rook e7 there is queen d4 trick. If rook e5, then we have d3 intermezzo. Queen cannot take because rook is hanging, so queen e3 has to be played. d6 targeting the rook again. Rook e4, d5. So our pawns are just marching forward. 2 extra pawns, by the way. Now rook e5, we have bishop g4 in this position, and okay, we will most likely put the bishop on e3. We're going to see where our bishop going, but maybe to e6 and then finish the development by castling. Also, we have to be also ready for some knight c5 moves, but definitely we have to solve the issue of the development in the next few moves. So g5, we have to take, pawn takes and queen takes. We're still defending the knight on e7, so we shouldn't worry. Knight d4, now castle, and the problem is that now knight is not hanging on e7 due to the pin on the rook on c1. So many tactical ideas. Okay, so g3 here, then we go for d5 immediately. With rook d1, king d8. And if bishop g2, then we go with a similar idea of with knight d4, and after knight d4, castle again. Knight is hanging, and if white is taking the knight on e7, we take the knight on d4, and we're entering the position with 2 extra pawns. If rook f3 here, which is the best move, we have to accept the draw. So if white is going for it, white, the only way is to keep the position or save the game is to go for a draw. And we kind of have to agree. It depends how we want to agree. Do we want to take pawn on h4 or not? So if they take pawn on h4, the problem is rook c4. We go back, and well, we never can go to the e file, because after we go to e file, then rook e4 is going to be played, and we are losing. So maybe I'm not sure if we're losing, but it looks very bad. Of course, yeah, actually we are losing, yeah, because two rooks are going to come here, and we are lost. So let's not do that. Let's not blunder queen e5. Let's just do a draw, which is the question: why not to do a draw immediately? Because here we have queen e5. I would say that maybe this is a bit safer, not to allow this rook to enter the game. So queen e5, and after rook e3, queen f6. Or you can play a couple of moves like this and then take the pawn, and then see maybe your opponent is not going to repeat. Who knows? And then you're just going to win the game later, being up 2 pawns. But of course, you have to also be careful due to this deadly pin on the knight. So that was all this knight d5 move. Now we go for bishop e3, the main move and the most common move in the position. So white is developing and not threatening, but offering a trade to the bishops. So here we have to remember that we are going for the same move, like we're transposing to the line we already discussed. We're going for the d6 here. Oh, 1 second. Oh, wait a second. Maybe I just missed one variation. Let me try to go back, just trying to understand if I missed some variation. So h4. We looked here at a4. Sorry. So knight d5. We looked at the line. We looked at these lines. Sorry, I think now I looked a4. And here g4, this. Sorry, we didn't look at all lines. Okay, sorry, we are returning back. Okay, so here we looked at rook h3 and king d8. This was for sure what we looked at. And now bishop d2. we looked as well, right? Just double checking. Yes, so exactly this is the line where we stopped. Sorry, I went too fast back because here we forgot to check the g4 move, which is the most common move in this position. So now there is a d6, and after g5, queen g6, just removing queen back. The queen e5, the problem is that after queen e5 and after hg, bishop g5, queen e5, it's going to lead to some very complex endgame. So that's why we keep the queen for now. For now, we keep the queen on g6. So now in case of g takes h6, we're just taking bishop e3, trading the queens, trading the bishops, and queen c2, rook c1, queen b2, rook c7, giving up a pawn. Of course, we have to, and we go back with the queen to defend the knight on e7. In the next moves, we're going to play king f8, and we're just getting a complex position. We're ready to remove knight away from e7. We're up a pawn. Position is complex and going to be a good fight. In case of rook g1 here, we're taking on g5 because after rook g5 we can play queen f6. And here in this position, the h4 is going to be very weak. h5 immediately, very interesting. Here we play queen f5. We cannot take any of the pawns, so queen f5, hgh, and rook h4. These moves are the best moves of the computer, so it's very tough to find it for white. But okay, if white is going for it, then of course we have to be ready. So queen d5, we take the pawn, bishop d2, and now bishop e6. So now we blocked against all the ideas against our knight on e7 after a long castle, Now we're getting into the very complex position, which is actually pretty, looks pretty good for black, but it's around equal. And again, to reach this position, white has to play a lot of very good moves from the like top engine moves. So now we looked at everything. Now we go to the bishop e3 move. Sorry, guys, that I a little bit I forgot to check the g4 line. So now we go with the main line, bishop e3, developing the bishop, which makes a lot of sense. First of all, the long castle is coming very soon, and well, the trade of the bishop is another threat. And yeah, we have to go with the flow how we used to do it. We go with a d6. We're doing the same how we did against other moves. So we transpose in this position. We are different move order. Sometimes we played d6 first. Sometimes we played queen f6 first. So now we transposed with all this tricky move order, but we finally reached this position. So now we are starting. Now we're starting to look at the moves which white can go for. So knight b5. Knight b5, attacking the pawn on c7. The threat is, of course, a take on b6 and take on c7. Not the most common move in the position, but of course it's good to know how to react on this move. And here we are first. We have to play a6. The point is, of course, we cannot take on e3. There is going to be a check. So we have to be really careful. So that's why after knight b5, we play a6, targeting the knight. Knight has to go away or do something. In case of bishop takes b6, of course, we're taking on b5. If bishop c7, now queen b2. Now we traded the pawns, which looks like a pretty nice trade. Rook d1, attacking the pawn on d6 also. And after castle, bishop d6, rook e8. We sacrifice the pawn for such a huge activity of the pieces, the huge development of the pieces. We are ready to jump with the knight on e5 to the next move. e4 is going to be a target in the position. The king is not castled. We have also ideas always to grab a pawn to win the pawn back. So actually we have double pawns, but it's okay. It's okay. We are even having chances to get 2 pawns in the next move. So yeah, great compensation for black. If bishop takes b6 first, that's the only way to make this knight b5 work is first to take on b6, pawn takes, and now jump knight b6. Now we're attacking, or now white is attacking on b6, on c7, sorry. And now we actually don't react, we just ignore, we play castle. Because after knight c7, we have very nice ideas. Okay, first of all, queen b2 is possible, but we are forcing a draw here because after knight e8 we have knight d4, trade is happening. King e2, queen c5, and if queen d2, we're just making a draw. Check, check. So rook a4 is an interesting try. So just keep the position. Again, we sacrificed a pawn. Let's not forget about that. So now c3, white is stopping any ideas of taking on b2. Now we go d5. We're breaking the pawn on e4 with the rook on a4, so it's very interesting. E takes d5, now queen f4. First of all, blocking white from castling long. Of course, white would also not really castle due to the problem on a2. There is rook e4, a very nice threat. We're also attacking the knight on c7. What to do? f3, but then we're taking the knight, and after dc, we're playing knight f5. So again, we're still down material. Currently, we're down 2 pawns, but okay, rook e8 is for now not really a move, but rook d8 could be a move, or preparing rook e8 could be an option, definitely, in this position. And well, since the king cannot really castle yet because of the issues on the a2 square, we're having a big compensation. And it's looking at the position with a human eyes, it's very tough to see how white is holding everything together. Computer says it's still possible, but of course humans are not computers, so big chances for black to win this game. So that was a bishop b6. So now let's see what happens if long castle happens. Long castle is coming like as a standard move, follow-up plan, what white is normally doing. Now we have to develop the bishop, and again, we're discussing where to develop the bishop, to e6 or to the or to the d7, and of course d7 is always a better choice due to the knight d5 jumps, where we want to capture the knight with the pawn, with the knight, sorry. So in case of queen f3, we are ready to trade and go for f5, breaking the e4 pawn and getting into a very pleasant endgame. In case of g3, which could bring the bishop to g2 and then follow up with the f4, then we are going for long castle ourselves. With bishop g2, we have g5. Now we can block the idea of, I mean, we are not really blocking the idea of f4, but it's going to weaken for sure the pawn structure. And in case f4 played immediately, then we play queen h6 with the next move of f5, breaking the pawn, breaking the center with f5 break, attacking the pawn on e5. So then after bishop g2, we have f5. Trade of the bishop happens, it must happen. Takes ef6, knight f5, and now we're having opportunity to bring our rook all the way to the e file. We have a great position. We have a bit of imbalance since we have 4 pawns on the queen side, 4 against 3 on the queen side, 3 against 2 on the king side. But yeah, it's just a position where we're getting a play. No really issues for black, so we're just accepting it. So it was g3 move. So now f4 immediately. Here I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black. So I hope you found the move very interesting. Very interesting move, using the fact that the bishop is now not defended by pawn. So here we have a nice move, even though the last move was bishop d7, we play bishop g4. Because now after queen g4, we take on e3, king goes away, and we're taking a pawn. Bishop b5, of course, white is trying to continue the play because we are a bit down on the development. Queen g5, threatening to trade, queen goes away, short castle, and well, we're getting position where we are up a pawn. Not much of a compensation, I would say. Also, the weakness on e4, isolated pawn, later we can attack it. So yeah, definitely a good position for black. f3, trying to be more solid and defending the pawn on e4. But of course, this kind of pawn structure, okay, potentially maybe g4 and h4 could be ideas for white, but this kind of structure is not really so good because we are always going to be ready to push for the f5 or d5. And in this particular case, of course, we will mostly go for the f5 breaks. So after long castle, queen d2, we're just trading the pieces, and after queen g6, removing the queen, ready to push for the f5, bringing the rooks to the e and f file, and putting more and more pressure in the center. again, without any problems. So king b1 is very useful move, and we of course also have king b8 later in the game, so we have to castle, and after bishop b6, a b g3. Now, of course, we finished the development. We castled. We can stop g5. We can stop, sorry, f4 with g5 here. Of course, it's not a must, but why shouldn't we do if we can do it? We're stopping f4 ideas where, for example, after bishop g2, we play queen g7. We're bringing the rooks on the e and f files, and we are ready to break the center with the f5 move. Again, we're getting around equal position. I'm not going to say that that black is better here, but we equalized. We have a good position to play. We're going to put more pressure on the e pawn. We're going to break it with the f5 as well. We will most likely enter the endgame where we'll have 4 against 3 on the queen side, and white will have 3 against 2. So it's going to be very interesting and double-edged position. So yeah, that was actually it from the chapter. Now I would like us to go through the key moments and main topics from this chapter, main ideas. Let's start from the beginning. So the first position is white played just now queen e2, and white is ready to go with the bishop e3. We're discussing about this particular choice of the move order. That here we try to be a bit more flexible and play d6. So we are not yet rushing with queen coming to f6. So trying to be flexible, trying to first play d6 and then to see if we go with a knight to f6 or not, because in some lines we might go for knight f6 instead of queen f6 and knight g7. So that's the key move. Then after bishop coming to e3, here we played the previous move was a5. We were discussing that a4 could be played to stop our pawn. But if white is not doing it, and okay, in case a4 play, just for a time, just briefly to show that in case of a4 play, we must play knight b5 so that there is no bishop e3. But if something happened like this, that bishop e3 is played, we must know this move. We must know that we have to play a4 here. We must do it. And here, for example, after knight d2, we're just trading and playing a3. And in case of bishop b6, then we're taking on b3, which is also very important to remember, and taking on a2. A bit simplifying position, but this is a key move, this a4. a4 we have to remember. The next position is after the move knight c3. So now knight c3 is played. So we got to this position as this a4, a5, knight c3. So now the point is with knight on c3 that knight wants to go to the d5, and we have to remember that. Since our queen is not on f6, playing something like knight e7 would block ideas from queen to be developed on f6, which is normally a square where the queen is standing. So that's why in this position we have to play knight b4. We have to stop the idea of knight b5. And if knight is coming to b5, we're going to grab it. So this is kind of easy to remember. And especially after a4 is played and knight on c3 is already standing, knight b4 is pretty easy move to make since no pawn push is going to happen. Next position is when queen f3 was played with this line with f4. So now this is this is a pretty common move. And again, we were also discussing this position. In the practice, it hasn't happened yet. And this position happened many times, but the move or the idea from black hasn't happened yet, which is going to refute this line, which is going for the d5, breaking the center. We are having lead in the development, and in that way we're trying to show it by playing the d5 move. And now for problem for white, the taking on d5 is not really good because we're going to have knight b5. And if white is not taking but pushing forward, then we're going to always have these ideas of queen h4 check, bishop g4, and so on and so forth. So this is actually very important, the key move. The other idea, this particular position, so it started like with the main line, knight c3, queen f6, queen e2, knight g7, and now a4. And the problem here is with this a4 that if we're going to reply normally with a5, sorry, then after bishop e3, we're not going to reach anything, because after bishop takes, queen takes, knight b4, castle is going to happen, pawn is defending. So that's why super important move in this position. So we are not in time also to bring the knight to b6, b5, b4, because a5 would win for white. So we have to do something. And that's why okay, it will not actually there is going to be bishop before move, but I think it's going to be a very bad position. So it's not really working as we wanted. I mean, ideally we would need both a5 and a knight before on the board, but we don't have it. So here we have this kind of exception where we have to remember for move knight d4. Knight d4, we're going to a bit simplify the position. And with this move, we're just getting rid of all the issues with a bishop on b6. Very important move. So now it was the last move. I think h4 was played the last move, introducing the bishop g5 idea with all the threats in the position. So now the point is it's not really yet so dangerous because, okay, the file is not open. So here we can go for the d6. We're going for d6 because normally bishop g6 is very dangerous when it's combined with knight d5. But in this particular case, they're not on time. So we're playing d6 because the problem is if we played h6, then g4 would be a move which white would consider to play. And okay, if knight d5, then we're going to transpose to some of the lines which are actually completely fine for black. Next position is the next position with h4 again played. It's a different position. It's already after inclusion of the knight d5, knight d5. Basically, very dangerous position right now since bishop g5 is real threat. Also, rook is coming from h3. So here we must prevent it and play h6. So now bishop g5 takes doesn't work because we have take on f2 later in the line. I was showing it before, but okay, it doesn't work. But here we have to prevent h6 already. So after knight already jumped on d5, when we don't yet have the pawn on d6, it's also very important. We don't have the pawn on d6. And the next position and the last one is when white went for the long castle. Right, the last move was yes, long castle. This is a position. So here we have to finish the development as well. We need to long castle and we have to develop our light squared bishop. But in order to do that, we have to understand where to put the bishop. Because if we put it on e6, the problem is that after knight d5, there's going to be a big problem because of the fork. So that's why it's much more useful to have the bishop on d7, so that after knight d5, we could take with a knight and we would just need to move the knight from c6, and there are no forks and nothing. So bishop d7 is the key move here. Thank you so much for watching the video, for studying this chapter. I hope it was useful for you and you learned something today. And I'm going to see you in the next chapter.